first, I'd like to hand it over to Chad Orn, who is the Department of Transportation's Deputy Director of Planning. Chad, go ahead.
Thank you. I can't get my video to turn on, but oh, there we go.
There you are.
Thank you. I want to take this opportunity to thank and welcome everybody for attending on behalf of the DOT. Like Catherine said, my name is Chad Orn. I'm the Deputy Director for Planning here at the North Dakota DOT. As you might be aware, NEVI is a $5 billion program that is being administered at the federal level through federal highway. It was a program that was included with IIJA or bill, the current surface transportation bill that was started in 2022. The federal government has delegated the implementation of this program to each state DOT. Even though North Dakota has been slow to adopt EVs into their personal vehicle fleet, it is still important to recognize that other states are seeing faster adoption, and EV infrastructure is important to make sure that everyone can still travel to our state and across our state, come to our attractions, and continue to participate in growing our economy. North Dakota DOT will be focusing on following the federal requirements while building a system that is safe, reliable, and a benefit to North Dakota's communities, businesses, and the visitors. Like other states, North Dakota will be looking for private partners to implement this program. We at the DOT are great at building roads and bridges, but we'd rather leave EV charging to those who better know the industry and the technology. To that end, we have been working to structure our program to be competitive in the market, allow small businesses and local businesses to participate, and to use the program as an opportunity to build North Dakota's workforce. The material that will be presented today is intended to help potential applicants understand the status of North Dakota's NEVI program, helping to avoid some common mistakes in applications, and to provide an opportunity for participants to know who else is out there in the market looking for those partners. Again, on behalf of the North Dakota DOT, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope this opportunity can help you be successful in capturing some of the federal NEVI dollars.
Thank you so much, Chad. So I'll just go over a little bit of housekeeping, the agenda, and then I'll present our speakers. So again, this event is being recorded for the purpose of us putting this recording up on the website so that those who were unable to attend can learn more, as well as hear everyone's presentations on site hosting. Use the chat feature down at the bottom, the chat icon, and type in your name and organization to introduce yourself if you would like. And then throughout the presentation, feel free to also use the Q&A feature if you have a question to ask, and we can get that addressed during our Q&A areas throughout this presentation. We'll have 2 Q&As. So I see folks are already typing in the chat. Thank you so much. The agenda. So today, first we'll get through some introductions. Then I'll hand it over to Russ to talk about the event purpose. Then we'll talk about the NEVI program as a whole, the program status in North Dakota, program requirements, and then open it up to the networking. So when you all registered for this event, you were asked if you want to present, and I have a list of those folks, and you'll have about 2 minutes to do your spiel, and that'll come up towards the end of the meeting. And then we'll open it up to anyone who didn't register that would like to speak as well. And then we'll wrap it up with timeline and next steps. So we already heard from Chad today. You'll also be hearing from Russ, who's the program manager for NEVI. I'm your facilitator, Katie Angel. I'm at HDR, the consulting firm helping on this project. And then Thomas Stout is a technical lead with HDR, who will be talking about some of the NEVI requirements and best practices. So with that, I'll hand it over to Russ.
Thanks, Katie, and good afternoon, everyone. So the event purpose, hopefully everyone understands what's kind of going on here. And our goal is basically create this networking event to basically provide, we call it a notice of funding opportunity, that this is phase 1, and this is going to be issued out in June of this year. And then this is for the EV charging stations which are direct current fast charging stations. So we'll kind of get into what it is, and then that way we can kind of build those partnerships and facilitate, the building of these stations along our alternate fuel corridors. So next slide, Katie. So here's kind of the overview. Hopefully this is not new to everyone. So what these are going to be is level 3. And a level 1 is like your 110 outlet. A level 2 is like your drying machine, dryer. And then also these are, DC direct current fast chargers. So what these chargers, they'll go along our AFCs, what they call alternative fuel corridors, which is we identified as our interstates, I-94 and I-29. So that's what we're going to be doing. With federal requirements, these chargers cannot exceed 50 miles. They can't be 50 miles apart. So in order for it to be compliant, they have to be within 50 miles. And then these charging stations, okay, each site has to have at least 150 kilowatts. They can be larger, but they have to have at least of a minimum of 150 kilowatts, and there'll be 4 chargers at each site. So as far as the program funding, it is at least 20% will be a non-federal match. It could be more, more than that. This is where it gets to be competitive bidding. So it may differ depending on locations and everything else, but it could be the max is 80-20. So with that, with the charging stations, once it's fully built out, the next thing is that there is a 5-year period where your operational and maintenance costs are covered. And I'll get into more of that as far as what things are covered and what things are not. But those are the kind of the guidelines that with NEVI are going on. So the intent is to build this program and then have 5 years of operational and maintenance costs. So we can build, I guess, I'll say electric vehicles within our state. Currently, we have 950 registered fully electric vehicles within the state. The majority of them are in Cass County, almost half. So that is as of May 1st. So next slide. So what this depicts the clusters, and this is out on our website. So if you go to dot.nd.gov/NEVI, this will get you to that. You can see this interactive map, and then you can zoom in as well. And then what this is our phase 1. So phase 1 we identified is our rural sites. So right now, if you look on these, it's the red ones that are identified. There are 10 sites. So we got 6 along I-94 and 4 along I-29. So these are our first go around. So our notice of funding opportunity will be going out mid-June, like I mentioned, and we're going to look for a charger within that cluster. So you're only competing with those, I'll say like 94A, which is the beach area in that area. You're competing. We need a charger within those 4 exits. So hopefully that explains it. Another one would be 94G, where you have Sterling and Steel. So that is basically they're competing against each other, and we'll have one charger either at one of those locations. So you'll also notice there is kind of like a yellow home base, which stands for Electrify America chargers, and that's EA chargers. There are currently 2 in the state. One is in Jamestown, and the other one is in Grand Forks. So they're actually the size of those chargers and what they have on those chargers do qualify. So you won't see, in the future, you won't see any advertisements within those areas for chargers in those areas. So again, the AFCs is again in I-94 and I-29. So next slide. All right, so this is your timeline. It's pretty basic. So within the timeline, we're looking at is, again, by mid-June, we plan on releasing the NOFO. And this is strictly for the rural phase, those 10 charges that you just saw on the previous slide. So with that, okay, we're anticipating, mid-June. So by mid-August, we expect to have your basic proposals back to us. And then hopefully we'll have selection by late October, if not early November. We'll have the selection, go through the selection process, and then the awardees will be identified. And then also within the that late time frame, we plan on going to the urban phase. And the urban phase is what I'm calling is your Fargo, your Grand Forks, your Bismarck, your Dickinson. So in Valley City. So those are the locations that will do that, and it'll probably just kind of basically repeat itself. So next slide. All right, so here's some of the features. The main key takeaway on this is 1 proposal per cluster. Okay, like we identified on the map, these clusters. So I'll use again sterling and steel. You only can do one proposal. You can't submit a proposal for steel, and you can't do a proposal for sterling. You have only one proposal for that area. So that's the main takeaway as far as this. So as far as the applicants, it's your responsibility to form the team, select the site, and submit your proposals. Again, one proposal per cluster. So, and then once the authorities have been selected, and then it's your responsibility to get the permits, the construction, the operational, and as well as the ongoing maintenance. So after the 5 years, ownership of this becomes it's basically privately run. Then they're yours. So next slide. So here's a few more of as far as the features. So the reimbursement. So as far as the reimbursement goes is the NEBI, the O&M and the capital costs, so applicants have to cover. And then they submit for reimbursement through the federal funds. And there is going to be a portion of withholding to make sure that you meet the criteria for every year. With that, we'll release 20% for every year for the and include your operational and maintenance cost. With the operational and maintenance costs, as you can see on the second bullet there, it includes your cost for electricity demand charges, which is huge. And then also your battery systems and both your peak shaving and supplement power. So those are the areas that are covered within that 5 years. So you can do a lot of the maintenance, the snow removal, all those things that are required to keep those systems up and operational in tip-top shape. So the last thing is just kind of came out, they're just because these are, I'll say, rural sites, they might not have that, I'll say, busy activity in those areas. So what we'll look at is the anticipated utilization, and then there'll be a table out there that you can look at what's your feeder size of your battery supplement system that you need for that type of charger within that area. And it could be really one of these areas. I'll use Medina as an example in that area, that cluster. You may or may not see many chargers in those areas. So to get by with some of the without the 480 volt 3-phase, you might be able to get by with a battery backup system. So next slide. So I'll just turn it over to Thomas Stout, who's from HER, who is part of our contracting system. Go ahead, Thomas.
All right, thank you, Russ. So I'm going to go a little bit more detail into some of the NEVI requirements, particularly some of the things that are a little more difficult to understand and that we've seen trouble with people getting the requirements really nailed down. And other places want to make sure that everything is clear to you as you go to put together your proposals. So starting with the requirements that are in the NEVI rule itself. So you do have to have a minimum of 4 ports, but you can have more ports. Before is the minimum. And we'll get in a little bit more detail about what a port is, because there's a very specific definition of that in the rule itself. Each one of those ports does have to do 150 kilowatts of power, and you can do power sharing among ports as long as each port can get 150 kilowatts in the worst case. So your power sharing can take you higher than 150, but it can't take you lower than 150. And then each port also has to have 2 connectors on it. One, a CCS connector is required by the rule in 680, CFR 680. And then the DOT is also requiring there to be a second connector with a NACS connector. If we look at this graphic here on the bottom, you can kind of see the flow of power, how it gets from the utility to the vehicle. So you have your utility connection, since you have to have 150 kilowatts per port. That is 600 kilowatts minimum if you have 4 ports. Now, the exception to this will be those sites that can have batteries, where there will be a different minimum requirement specified in a table along with a battery size. So that would be your power connection, either coming from the utility or your utility plus augmented with a battery system. That goes into the charger. A charger could have 1 or more ports on it, has to support 150 kilowatts per port. Each port then has 150 kilowatts and will have 2 connectors, 1 CCS1 connector and 1 NACS connector. And then the vehicles connect to a port through a connector. And only 1 connector can be used at a time. And that's how the definition of port works. If you could hook up both connectors at the same time, that would, the way port is defined, actually be 2 separate ports. So when they're part of the same port, they can only be used 1 at a time. We'll talk a little bit more about that in another slide here. But on the next slide, we can see the other requirements related to the program at large, which is that you have to have stations every 50 miles, and this is where those clusters that were defined come from. So that analysis has already been done by the DOT. That's why you are, certain exits where they're looking for chargers, that's going to make sure that we meet this 50-mile spacing. As a proposal, what you need to make sure is that that 1 mile spacing is met. So you can only be no more than 1 mile off of the AFC, and that's measured from the end of the nearest off-ramp to the location of the station. So we need to be within 1 mile with this 50-mile spacing. So that's the kind of the big picture of the NEVI requirements. This next slide, we kind of dive into a little bit more details about some of the definitions of the different pieces of the system. So within the NEVI rule itself, things have very specific definitions that do not always match how these words are just kind of used in general. And so we want to make sure that when you're looking at the rule and where the definitions, where the requirements are placed on certain things, you're understanding what that actually means in terms of what you have to implement. So a station within the rule, that's an area where the chargers are located. A charger is just equipment that converts power for use. So you could have 1 charger on a site, you could have 2 chargers, you could have 4 chargers. There are lots of different arrangements of chargers because they are doing the power conversion, but they're not directly related to connections to a vehicle. What relates to connections to a vehicle is a port. And a port is kind of a difficult concept because it is just a concept, it's not a physical construct. So it is a single output from a charger that can charge 1 vehicle at a time. And then the last piece that you'll see is connectors. And so the connectors are the physical connection between the charger and the vehicle. And there are lots of different types of physical connections that can be used. So in this example, there are lots of different configurations shown. You wouldn't typically see a site like this, but it's really just to give you an idea of the types of different arrangements that are allowed. So for example, in the middle, you see that charger, where we have 1 charger that has 2 ports. One of those ports, the port on the left, has a single cable with 1 connector on the end of that cable. That may be a CCS1 connector. And then it also has an adapter, which is shown as being permanently attached to the side of the unit. And if you're familiar with something like the Tesla Magic Dock, that would be one example of an adapter. Or it could be an adapter that's just physically attached to the charger on a cable or something similar to that, so that the adapter is always available for someone who needs to use it. That would then do the conversion from CCS to NACS. And that would be an example of a port then that has a port on that connector. 1 connector is cabled, 1 connector is through an adapter. They're part of 1 port that can charge 1 vehicle. On the right side of that equipment, we see another typical configuration where we have 2 cables. One of them here would be CCS, the other one would be NACS. But they're part of the same port, which would mean only one of them could be used at a time. So you couldn't plug that into 2 separate cars. You could only hook up one of those at a time. And that's going to be part of the software configuration of the system, and then also the physical layout of the spaces. So that's really only possible to put 1 car on that charger at a time. But then you'll also see other configurations. For example, the other chargers shown here are just single port chargers that have a single cable with an adapter. And there are other configurations we'll see as well that we'll get into on these next several slides. So I want to go over a few examples of typical configurations, just so you understand what is allowed by the NEVI rule as configurations that are that meet everything that you need to meet. So here's an example of a very basic, kind of the most straightforward way to implement a NEVI station. So that's to have your utility connection of greater than 600 kilowatts, so that we're not relying on any battery here. This is the most simple way to do this. That goes through your electrical distribution panels. And then you have 4 separate chargers. Each charger has a single port, and each port has 2 connectors. So this would be, those connectors could either be on a cable or they could be through an adapter. And then you would have 4 separate boxes physically sitting on your site that are powered independently, each one providing at least 150 kilowatts of power. So this is the most straightforward and the most simple way to think about a typical NEVI station. On the next slide, we have another configuration of a typical NEVI station. And this is one where we do have some power sharing going on. So in this case, we still have that utility connection of greater than 600 kilowatts, not relying on a battery, goes through the electrical distribution panel, but there are only 2 physical chargers now instead of 4. But each of these chargers is a dual port charger. So it can charge 2 vehicles at the same time, but they are higher power. So these, in this example, we're showing 300 kilowatt chargers. What this would mean is that you could charge a single vehicle on either of these chargers at up to 300 kilowatts via power sharing. Or if there were 2 vehicles present, they could each charge at 150. Also, for both of these chargers and every port on these chargers, you always have the option for either NACS or CCS. And again, that can either be through separate cables or through adapters. But you will always have at least 4 ports and 8 connectors for a NEVI compliant station. The next station here is showing you another typical example, maybe a little bit less common, but still something that you may see, that you may propose as a solution here. And this is looking at, again, utility connection of greater than 600 kilowatts. So there's no battery, goes through your electrical distribution panel. And then you have a single large charging cabinet. So your charger is all completely self-contained, and it can do the entire site from one box. In this case, a 600 kilowatt charging cabinet that supports 4 ports. Each of the ports is implemented as a single dispenser that gets wired back to that cabinet. And the dispensers are a single port each, and each dispenser has 2 connectors on it. Again, those connectors can either be via a cable or via an adapter. So there would be 4 dispensers, and they would all share power off of the same cabinet. In the worst case, when all 4 cars were in use, you would have 150 kilowatts available for each car, which meets the requirement. But in the best case, if only one was being used, you could have up to 600 kilowatts going to a single car via the power sharing arrangement. And so then the last typical example that we'll look at deals with batteries. So as we mentioned, there are some configurations where batteries are going to be allowed, and you could potentially reduce your grid connection size. And what usually happens is that battery will sit between your utility connection and the rest of the system. So everything sort of downstream of the charger. I showed the simplest case here, but you can imagine any of those typical configurations could be downstream of the battery, where the battery is now sitting and providing backup power potentially, or being used for peak shaving, or there are typical ways that batteries are used to enhance these types of stations. And so this is another typical example that you'll see with that battery sitting right after the utility connection. The next few slides will go through some common mistakes that we see people make as they try to develop stations that are NEVI compliant. And we want to point these out just so you know what the problems are, so that you can avoid them yourselves. So the first most common mistake is people do not have a CCS connector and a NACS connector on every port. So in this example, we see just a very straightforward 4 chargers, each one single port. Each charger only has a single connector, and 2 of them have NACS and 2 of them have CCS. This would not meet the requirement because you have to have both NACS and CCS on every port. If we go to the next slide, we get another typical mistake, which is to look at the power per port individually, but not all at the same time. So within the NEVI rule, you have to be able to provide 150 kilowatts per port simultaneously to all ports, which means if you have 4 ports, that is 600 kilowatts at a minimum. If you have more than 4 ports, and that number goes up, it's always 150 kilowatts per port. This is an example of a configuration where they bring in less than 600 kilowatts, probably only 300 kilowatts in this example, from the utility. They distribute that power to 2 different chargers that are 150 kilowatt chargers that are dual port. Now, it is true that any individual vehicle could connect to any of the 4 ports and get 150 kilowatts. But if you were to hook up 4 vehicles at the same time, the power would be reduced to 75 kilowatts due to the power sharing. And that is not allowed by the NEVI rule. You have to be able to hit 150 kilowatts when all of the ports are in use at the same time. All right, and so we can go on to the next one. And this is the last example of a typical mistake. And this is where people bring in not enough power and not enough battery when they are doing something that's battery backed up. So your BESS cannot replace your utility power unless it meets some additional requirements. So if you are looking at a site where maybe the utility connection will be prohibitively expensive to install, or you're seeing some other financial benefit to doing a smaller grid connection or using it for more than just peak shaving, and so you want to bring in less than 600 kilowatts, there will be a table in the requirements that specifies both the minimum power for the site as well as the minimum battery size. And then those two things are going to be related to each other. So as you increase the size of your utility connection, the requirements on your battery will decrease. Up until once you have 150 kilowatts per port from the utility, no battery is required. But when you have less than 150 kilowatts per port, there will be that table. Make sure that you pay attention. So you make sure that first you're putting in the minimum utility supply at least, and then also that you are putting in the appropriate battery size for the utility that you are providing. So that is what I had to say about the program and kind of what we've seen other places, and hopefully that helps you understand the requirements of the NEVI program a little better.
Thank you so much, Thomas. Okay, real quick, we're gonna just take a second and see if there are any questions with the information that has been presented so far. You could either use the Q&A feature, the chat feature, or you can raise your hand and I can allow you to speak if you would prefer talking in front of the group. So I'll give it just a minute here to see if anyone has questions. And there will also be another opportunity at the end for Q&A. Okay, so we have some questions coming in, and I believe the panelists can see these as well if you click on the questions feature. So I'll start with the first one. This is from Hong. We have a site in Jamestown, North Dakota, which also makes the site quality for NEVI. Or sorry, site qualify for NEVI. Do they qualify? And I'll let whoever answer that, if they have the answer. If not, we can get back to you if.
I guess I'll try to answer that. For his question is currently right now, we're not anticipating putting a NEVI charger in the Jamestown site just because we do not want to basically compete with Electrify America. Because right now that main exit is the one exit that we were looking at. And to compete with that, it's really not fair to that NEVI owner. So currently right now, we are not looking at putting one in Jamestown. So hopefully that answers that question.
Great, thanks, Russ. Yeah, Hong, I see your hand is also raised, so I'll allow you to speak. You can.
So yeah, thanks a lot, Katie. So just wanted to give you guys a background on that site. So we were recipients of the U.S. Department of Energy grant. So that site was built a little bit earlier than the one in the Volkswagen. We just had a little bit of time working with the local utility to get the 3-phase transformers there. But our site it has 150 per port, and it's two chargers. Yes, so we are also part of that the early I-94 corridor from Michigan to Montana. So it was a different program from the federal government too as well. But I know that site for the Volkswagen, it's a little bit farther from the exit. It takes a little bit longer to get to the other side. But we worked with the gas station there with SNR truck stop as a partner, right? So then they're getting half of the profits from there. Yeah.
Thank you, Hong, for that background. Russ, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, we're looking at the requirements that it has to be within that 1 mile. That is what basically Federal Highway is saying. So we did look at that, and again, since the Electrify America is in that area, it just made no sense to basically try to compete with that electric vehicle charging station, and it's brand new.
Great. Another question, can battery-based chargers be used even if the utility size supply is 600 kilowatt or better?
Yeah, and I can take this one. So yes, if you have less than 600 kilowatts from the utility, the batteries are required. If you have the 600 kilowatts from the utility, the batteries are not required, but they are still optional. So if you want to install a battery for peak shaving or some other reason, that is allowed. That is still an eligible expense.
Great, thank you for your question. Brad asks in the chat, is solar an option to power the batteries?
So solar is a little bit trickier. So yes, you can do solar. It would be an eligible expense under the federal NEVI program. The solar power can only be used to power the vehicles. So go to the batteries and the batteries can power the vehicles. You cannot participate in any net metering type of arrangement with solar panels that are paid for with the federal NEVI dollars.
Great, we'll hop back over to the Q&A. Keith asks two questions, or a few questions here. What is peak shaving?
Yeah, so peak shaving is when you install batteries to reduce your peak demand. So if you're familiar with how utilities bill for this type of power, the three-phase power, you'll pay two parts. It's a little different than you pay at your home. You're going to pay an energy charge and a demand charge. So the energy charge is just like you're used to per kilowatt hour. You're going to pay some fixed rate. The demand charge is based on the maximum power that you draw for a 15-minute period, typically anytime during the month. And so if you draw a very large power for a very short time, which is typical with DC fast chargers, you'll pay a very large demand bill. What peak shaving does is it allows you to use batteries that pull a much smaller demand for a longer time off of the grid. And then those peaks of power come out of the battery instead of the grid. So it reduces your demand charges to a more reasonable amount. So that's what I mean when I say peak shaving. I'm talking about reducing your demand charges from the utility.
And Keith also asked, how much space does each vehicle need to have? For instance, can you have 4 chargers with 4 diagonal parking spaces?
So the spaces do need to comply with ADA requirements. So as long as that is met, that you can comply with ADA, I have seen configurations that had diagonal parking. Typically, one of them is going to have to be a little bigger, have the access aisle. You have to work that out in your site design, but there's nothing that prohibits you from doing the diagonal parking if you can make the ADA parking work out.
Okay, and then a question from Tate. How are the proposals of competing sites compared?
I guess I can probably answer that one. So there'll be some criteria as far as point-based system that we're doing. So if it's a drive-through station, okay, you may get more points for that. And then also as far as if you have other amenities around that area. So if you're within, so you have bathroom, you have Wi-Fi, you have overhead canopy, you're open 24/7. Some of those criteria similar to that will basically, I'll say, enhance your proposal.
Great, and then there was a question that Russ responded to in the Q&A. So the question was, will chargers be only for passenger vehicles? Will chargers be only for passenger vehicles? Will they also need to have the room to charge semi-trucks? So Russ said, ideally, we would like to see drive-through chargers that would allow larger vehicles with a trailer to use the system. Okay, and that is it for this Q&A. We're going to move on now to the networking portion of the presentation. So this is when you were asked to register for the event, there was an option to say that you're interested in presenting. So we're going to go with the folks that said yes first. And then if you choose to present after those folks go, and if you didn't signify on the registration or if you didn't register, we'll open it up to the group to give their spiel. But essentially, each presenter will have 2 minutes to share the following information about your company. So please give and I'll have this slide up as you're presenting, unless you had a presentation or something, which we weren't planning on, but let me know if that's the case. But share your name, your company name, what type of company. So if you're a site host, a developer, small business, that sort of thing, what your interest is in the NEVI program, and the partnership type that your company is seeking. So are you looking for a site developer or an EVSE provider? Maybe you want to join on to a site host team, that sort of thing, to help prep people for building their teams for when the NOFO comes out. So with that, I'll start. I'm going in alphabetical order here. So American Lung Association and North Dakota Clean Cities. If you're on, go ahead and raise your hand and I can unmute you. Let's see. I believe that was Heather, and I'm not seeing Heather online, so we'll skip down to BTC Power. Is Patty on? There we go. All right. Oops. All right, Patty, go ahead. Oh, sorry, I'm going the wrong direction here.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hi, everyone. My name is Patty Diano. I am with BTC Power. We are manufacturer of both level 2 and DC chargers based out of California. So we are a North American based design and manufacturer of equipment. We do have NEVI compliant equipment that is manufactured out of our Irvine, California factory. And we're interested in partnering with companies where we could provide support with our chargers. We have been awarded some NEVI sites through some of our other partners. So definitely interested in joining a team and providing our support with our equipment.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Oh, I lost the list of participants here. All right. So then we'll go down to Energy Hunters. Hong, let me go ahead and find you and I'll allow you to talk here. There you go.
Hey everyone, can you hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. My name is Hong Zhang Durandal, and I'm one of the founders of Energy Hunters Inc. We are a site developer. We have developed lots of relationships with gas stations and hotels and restaurants across the U.S. We're active in 4 states now. We have been recipients of some NEVI fundings in the Southeast in the U.S. And we are a small business, minority business-owned business, and currently we have 5 charging stations operational that are NEVI compliant, and we have worked with BTC in some of them. We have BTC equipment. So what we're looking for is opportunities to partner with site hosts and as well with other small business partners that want to work with us. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Hong. All right, we got H&H Enterprises. Tate, I know you're on. Let me see if I can find you here. Oh, yeah, there you are. Oh, you disappeared. There we go.
Hi, my name is Tate. I'm with Coffee Cup Travel Plazas. We are a truck stop owner operator out of South Dakota, although we have 1 location in Steele, North Dakota. We have pretty large travel plaza centers with a number of offerings. We've been following the NEVI program since it was announced a couple years ago or so. So it's something that obviously EVs are going to take a while to really hit the Midwest hard, but it's still something that we need to it's a service we need to provide to customers. So I was excited to hear about the 5-year cost coverage for peak demand charges, since it doesn't seem like legislatively much of that has progressed. But anyways, we're a site host then. Like I said, we've been following the NEVI program for a long time. So I suppose we probably have a developer down, but I'm always interested to hear from others. So probably our biggest partnership we're seeking is an EVSE provider. We are Travel Centers of America. We are franchisees of TA. So with BP, we're obviously interested to see what BP does in terms of chargers. But again, I'd like to always hear from as many companies as we can while we put together our proposal.
Awesome. Thank you, Tate. Power Flex, is Jesse online? Let's see. Yeah, there you are, Jesse. I'm gonna allow you to speak.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So we are a owner operator here located in Tennessee. So we usually work on the rural development aspect of charging stations, 400 kVW. Basically developing a site that also can be utilized for other systems as well. So my background is also in data communications. Just so happens, we're working with North Dakota University on drone technology. So most of our sites we're actually planning to locate small edge-based co-location data centers as another source of income to kind of offset the cost analysis for our sites. And that would also support vehicle to vehicle, vehicle to grid, and virtual power plant operations as well. So it's all about that part of it, as well as a green hydrogen program that we're developing here in Tennessee that can also be duplicated. And eventually we would like to have our data centers and charging stations ran on hydrogen if that's a possibility. So we'll be at ATC this coming week in Vegas. So if anybody has my email, if you want to send me an email, I'll be happy to talk with them then. And I'm excited to try to see how many sites we can win.
Awesome. Thank you, Jesse. All right, next is Power Flex. David, let me allow you to speak. There you go, David. Are you able to and willing to still present? If you are, you're still on mute. All right, I'll skip you, David, for now. Let me look and see who's next. Pump and meter service. Richard. There you are. Allow you to speak. Are you there, Richard? I see you unmuted yourself, but I can't hear you. Richard, you're already unmuted. I think there might be a disconnect with your microphone, perhaps.
Yeah, he may need his audio and select maybe his camera or microphone. He might be pointing to the wrong one.
I'll come back to you, Richard. Next is the Red Rooster Motel. That's Keith. Let me find you, Keith, and I'll unmute you. There you go, Keith. You're allowed to talk if you want to unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I own the Red Roost Motel in Pembina, North Dakota. We are at exit 215 on I-29, the last exit before the Canadian border. We do have a lot of Canadian traffic. There are electric vehicles in Winnipeg, quite a few of them. So we are a site host, or possible site host, and we would be interested in partnering with site developer and the VSE provider. And I have some parking area, and there's a building right across the street from us that is for sale, that we could possibly utilize as well. We're about 3/4 of a mile from the interstate.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Keith. All right, next up is Zeph Energy. John, I'll allow you to speak now.
Good afternoon. Thank you. My name is John Deem. I'm with Zeph Energy. Zeph is a charge point operator. We're based in Minneapolis. I happen to live and work remotely out of Dickinson, North Dakota. So right in the cluster of one of the clusters. We have level 2 and DCFCs. Obviously, we're talking only DCFCs right now. And we provide our 5-year advantage. That includes 5-year standard product warranty, cellular connectivity, our ZephNet software licensing, and 24/7 US-based tech support. We have service level agreements at various levels, and to reach the 99% uptime requirement associated, or whatever the exact percentage is, I think it's 98%, excuse me, of uptime. So we have service level agreements that will support that. We, again, our headquarters is in Minneapolis, so we have a lot of presence in both level 2s as well as DCFCs in the upper Midwest, and as well as from coast to coast. We're also represented from Oregon all the way to South Carolina. We're very interested in finding hosts or site hosts, and we can provide everything from a turnkey solution, from assistance with the grant writing, and all the way through with the design site design, the execution, and post installation, the operational aspect. So thank you for letting me speak.
Awesome, John. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to try to give permission to those who weren't able to talk last time. David with PowerFlex. You want to try again? You have the ability to unmute yourself. Okay, it looks like we're still having issues there. And then let me find. No, I can't remember who else was the other. I think it was Richard. See, Richard, you want to try again? Shoot, shows you're unmuted, but we still can't hear you. So if you want to type your answers into the chat, similar to how Heather did, she was experiencing some connectivity issues as well. Feel free to do that. Okay, well, thank you all so much for those presentations. At this moment, I see that, there are 25 attendees here. Oh, great question, Brad. Will there be a place to find contact information for those involved? Yes, the website has the North Dakota Networking NEVI database that people are signing up for. You fill out all this same information, and then we'll be posting it on a weekly basis. So people have that up-to-date information. So if you haven't already registered for that database, please fill that out. Russ put in the website online on the chat there. But at this point, if anyone else wants to present, just go ahead and raise your hand, and I can allow you to speak, and you could give whatever information you'd like. I see Paul. Let me allow you to talk, Paul. Go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon. It's Paul Jensen from Greenway Energy in Fargo. We've been in business since 2011. Started out with compressed natural gas for trucks, and later into EV charging equipment, year 2014 and until now. We're predominantly focusing on EVSE supply, So we have a variety of authorized channel partner agreements with companies like Blink, ChargePoint, XCharge, and FreeWire. And so I'm interested in supplying the equipment and of course help where we can for those who wish to develop. So feel free to look us up. It's Greenway Energy in Fargo, North Dakota, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Paul. Any others that would like to present, go ahead and raise your hand. Click in the reactions feature and you'll be able to raise your hand that way. While we're waiting to see if any others want to speak, Jesse asks in the chat, any dates for the RFP being released yet?
And I can answer that. First of all, it's not going to be a request for a proposal. It's going to be a notice of funding opportunity or a NOFO. So that is going to be on the week of June 10th. Hopefully, I'll say that within that week, it'll be released on that date. So look for the week of June 10th.
Well, it doesn't look like anyone else wants to present, which is quite all right. I do encourage you, if you're looking for teams and want to be on the database, to fill out that link on the website that Russ posted. And with that, thank you again to all of our presenters and for attending today. I'm going to hand it over, or I guess actually any more questions before I hand it over to Russ for next steps. Yes, John, go ahead.
Demand charges were referenced as an allowable expense to be included. So we said demand, so energy is not an allowable expense. Is that true? That's probably a question for Russ.
Yeah.
That was in one of our discussions, and Justin, I think it is correct. Is that I believe that will be reimbursable.
Yeah, we are making sure that the DOT is essentially going to run forward with that. So we didn't put that on there right now. That will be an item that is clarified within the RFP. But there was some discussion internally to make sure that that is something that the DOT would add as an allowable cost.
Right. And correction, it's a NOFO again, but yeah.
Excuse me. Sorry, Russ.
Thanks, John.
There was a question from Peg out there as far as the deadline is. Why am I not seeing that question again? Hang on, I gotta scroll down here.
It's are there deadlines for physical construction?
We know that so this is going to be basically, you're going to be notified late October or early November as far as the awardee. To get the transformers, there could be a delay on transformers. We understand that. We're looking at is that hopefully that you can have that site operational in 2025.
Hey, Russ, this is Justin. There's one thing that we typically cover in these presentations that I just realized that we didn't, and it's one piece of throat clearing that we always like to say is, for anybody that's out there, with the way that federal funding works, do not make your purchases prior to the award of a contract, because it will not be a reimbursable expense at that point. So we want to make sure that everybody's aware. Don't go forward, even if you've received a notice to award, do not buy any equipment at that point, because it will not be reimbursable. It basically has to fall within the period of performance, which is essentially when the contract gets signed with the DOT. So just want to make sure everybody's on the level with that, and you're not kind of out over your skis and purchasing anything that you wouldn't be able to be reimbursed for.
Thanks, Justin.
All right. It looks like John's hand is permanently up. I think that's just a little glitch, but otherwise, I think that's it for questions.
We got Richard just came in here. So basically Richard posted basically what his business is and where he's located at. They're a family-owned business, so with the EDM infrastructure. So we have his phone number and everything else. So I guess this is recorded, so it'll be available on our webpage, like again at dot.nd.gov/NEVI. So you'll be able to see this web chat and everything else. So you'll be able to grab any information that's been posted out there. So,
Yeah, so
again,
with that,
Yeah, so again, here's our timeline. So mid-June, so like I said, the week of June 10th is our goal. We'll be sticking to it. Then we anticipate basically a 60-day response. So this is where we need to get, the correct, proposals out, back into us. Like Thomas Stout mentioned, as far as, the common areas that we're seeing right now. And then phase 2, which will be, I'll say, our larger larger cities. We plan on releasing those still in 2024, but it'll most likely be November, December timeframe.
Great. And Brad, I saw your hand went up, but then it went down. So I'm assuming, oh, okay, let me go ahead and there, you should be allowed to talk now, Brad.
Can you hear me?
Loud and
Yeah.
clear.
Cool. Yeah, so I have a couple questions, and just for the record, so everybody knows, I'm Brad Wangler with I own Rugby Electric here in Rugby, and I'm looking at the potential of a site location here in town. We have a possibility on a land purchase that's right on the main intersection of Highway 2 and Highway 3, right in the middle of kind of right in the heart of Rugby on the south end here. But so from a developer standpoint and from a electrical standpoint, I'd be interested in this. And I do know of a lot of the issues that the power companies are having as far as getting the 3-phase transformers in and things like that. So I guess I have the same kind of questions with regards to the equipment that would need to go in for these chargers themselves. What do we have for lead time on that stuff, and how available is that as far as being able to procure that stuff and have it be able to be installed in 2025? And then I'm also curious to know if there's any funding available for assistance with the purchasing of the land and things like that too, or is it just dedicated solely to the charging stations and the equipment themselves,
Great questions. Justin or Russ, Thomas?
Yeah, I can take that one if that's okay. So hi everybody. I've been kind of the silent one on here. My name is Justin Robbins, and I'm with HDR and actually the project manager on our behalf. So the way that the NEVI program has been kind of rolled out from the federal government is there is an existing program within FHWA called the Alternative Fuels Corridor Program, AFDC. And when they rolled out NEVI, they basically said that all the chargers have to be built along these corridors first. And then if a state has any money left over after those corridors are built out, then there's more flexibility for where you can build those. And so unfortunately, just a quick Google, Rugby is outside of one of the 2 corridors that right now is available for development for the charging infrastructure. So unfortunately, the answer that I have for you right now is it is not something that your property is going to be able to participate in as part of this program at the moment. Now, whatever happens in terms of the bids that are received, the amount of money it takes to build out the charging infrastructure along these 2 corridors, the money that's left over, then the DOT has some flexibility for how that gets spent. Now, that's going to be a bit in the future, so I can't make any promises for how much there's going to be or how it can be spent. But I did want to say that there's the potential for that to happen in the future. So I apologize for the bad news in terms of the adherence to the 2 corridors that we have to stay on. But again, it's part of the federal program because they're really prioritizing these long distance interstate corridors throughout the country. And that's really where at the moment the chargers have to go as part of that federal requirement.
And Brad, I have your name and number and stuff, so I have it on file. There may be other opportunities, and like Justin said, once we get this certified and built out, then those dollars can be built out elsewhere, and then the requirements change where they don't have to be 4 chargers and some of those other things. So, but it will take a while. So, but I do have your name and number on file.
Okay,
So you
thanks.
see the last slide there, there's a QR code that goes directly to our NEVI page on our dot.nd.gov/NEVI. So that information, just please go out there, take a look at it. It's updated, it's current, and there will also be upcoming events. And I want to just make sure, here's a plug for, we are doing an electric vehicle tailgating event at the Capitol complex, and that is on June 20th from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. This is probably, I think, our 5th year that we've been doing it, and we do it with some of the cooperatives and everything else, along with Bobcat, and we bring everything in as far as with OEM vehicles that are fully electric, as well as the Bobcat that's full electric. So if you have a chance, again, June 20th from 4 to 7 p.m.
And hey, Russell, I apologize. This is just we just keep going on.
Yeah.
Keith had a follow-up, so I did not address the question of helping with the purchase of the property. So as part of the NEVI program, that is not an allowable cost, the actual purchase of real property. It's mainly for the cost of construction, the cost of infrastructure, and essentially the allowable costs. The way that the federal program, and the guidelines, and the rules as dictated by FHWA, it essentially has to be necessary for the charging of an electric vehicle. So there's a little bit of wiggle room that we've seen back and forth between states on what accounts for that. But essentially, the purchase of property is not an allowable cost. As we also talked about really quickly, I did want to make sure that everyone's aware there are requirements for what's called Build America, Buy America. And so all the equipment that goes into these charging stations have to meet those federal requirements. And Thomas had the code up on the screen, CFR 680. There's links to that material as well, just so you can see what's involved in that. So I just wanted to make sure everybody is aware that that requirement is going to be a very important part of this program as well.
As well as being NEPA approved as well.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, we finished early. Hopefully that's great news to everybody. You get a whole hour back in your day. I appreciate everyone who joined us and gave a presentation. And again, go to the website. I pasted into the chat. It's also the QR code up here on the screen, but that's dot.nd.gov/NEVI, or sorry, /NEVI. And that has more information. That's where this video will also be posted. And we encourage you to sign up in that NEVI database so that folks have your contact information that potentially weren't on this call. But again, thank you so much. And reach out to us if you have any questions outside of this meeting. Any closing thoughts, Russ?
No, I'd say start early, so that way you're not really, behind, I guess, the curve when the date comes up as far as the deadline when they're due. So start early and get your partnerships and start doing the networking. That's all I have.
Yeah, and Paul, your question with the database, we'll be posting a PDF of it weekly. We're still collecting just some initial responses. Not many people have signed up for it yet, but we'll be posting everyone's contact information for that database on a weekly basis on the website. And it'll be in an Excel spreadsheet, but in a PDF format. So it can't be edited or anything like that. Thanks, Paul. Okay, well, thank you, everyone, and I hope you have a great rest of your day, and look forward to getting your responses to the NOFO later this year. Thank you. Bye.